Bitcoin Liberty Live, we're back. We just wrapped up a whole discussion that we didn't record, but we were talking about massive online games and the economics of everything about it, the creativity and the time we spend on doing that.
And cancel culture. Video production and survivorship bias. Man, we covered it all. So we fucked up.
The people that put in the proof of work, we talked about a bit last week, but you put in proof of work, you got passion. There's so many people with creative ideas and quality abilities out there. And then how does that turn into, oh, you're successful and you got published, you got your movie made, you did this, that, and the other. You got picked by the production house. And there's major survivorship bias when it comes to everything. This is how I was successful. I did this thing. Yeah. How did that happen? Well, it was the work. It was all the work.
Yeah.
Regardless of all the people that put in the work and the time and the energy and are not famous or whatever. Yeah. Not that it was not worth anything. I think the process itself is formative for the people.
Yeah.
But then down in there, you're like, I want to be famous too. Right. And there's only so much room for that.
Yeah.
And they're picked by a house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like astronaut candidates, right? Like that's one of probably the best examples of survivorship bias you can get, because it's so like detailed in how it all plays out. Like for 10 astronaut slots, there are 10,000 astronaut candidates. And, probably most of those candidates aren't ideal, but when you get to the upper echelons, like the top 1% of candidates, you've broken that down to like 100 people going for 10 slots. And if you look at them on paper, how do you pick a person?
They're all qualified.
100%. I mean, beyond ridiculously qualified.
Or you pick the best qualified guy, and then he gets up there and misses his dog once he's in the, up on the capsule.
Well, there was that one lady. You remember that lady that was like wearing diapers and traveling across the country to go shoot her ex-boyfriend or whatever? Like
That was an astronaut?
Yeah, that was an astronaut.
I think I remember that, but I forgot.
Well, but that's the point. She survived the selection process. And she was a fucking fruitcake, man. Like, she was absolutely
I forgot
crazy.
about that. That's right.
Yeah. So the thing is even with that filtering process, people are just like, well, how'd you get here? Because I worked hard and I'm this and that and I'm blah, 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 blah. Well, you didn't tell us you were a lunatic. How did you scrape through this amazing selection process and you're a fucking batshit crazy?
I also think there's a fine line between people with that level of hard work and genius and being a psychopath or being a quality psychopath versus a harmful psychopath.
A malicious psychopath.
You got to be a psychopath. It's like a politician. It's like any politician out there. The reason they can do that job is because they've got to be like a narcissist or broken.
You have to be.
You have to be. I don't know how a normal person survives. The assassination of their history, let alone wants to be that guy or gal who is like the guy or gal.
Well, I mean, just think about this prospect for a second. Like, to wake up one day and go, I am qualified to lead the United States of America. Like, how fucking batshit crazy do you have to be to have that thought in your head and then run with it? And
no one is qualified, and the most qualified people have to be crazy.
You'd have to be bonkers. I mean, you have to be bonkers even to think it, Mm-hmm. Because if you just look at the federal apparatus and think, like, how Leviathan is that thing that we've created?
So what's the number? I can't remember what it's called, but like people can only keep track of like 150, 160 people in their life.
Right. Yeah.
It's a number. It's a term. I can't remember. It relates to economics and relationships, networks, like nodes and networks. A human brain can only keep track of so many people.
Right.
So when you're managing the United States, is that even all of your department heads? I mean,
well, it's just delegation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a figurehead office that delegates authority, right? But as someone wrote a pretty good thread about it, Svetsky, I think, the guy that did the Bushido of Bitcoin, he said, anybody that comes along and says, oh, this, that, and the other thing, they don't understand like delegation risk. They don't understand complexity. They don't. And I agree with them on all counts. I go absolutely 100%. And I think I've said it before here. It's like when you hear people like, oh man, this manager is an idiot. Is your microphone off?
Let me turn the microphone on.
Oh, we haven't recorded any sound?
Is yours on?
Yeah.
Okay. Try to turn it on again. We're having technical difficulty, folks.
Oh,
so turn it
off because your thing wasn't on?
Okay.
Oh.
Well, I bet the phone was recording, so we probably our audio quality.
No, it can't because it was going to be cut off by that thing.
Oh, maybe.
Well, maybe it is.
We
may or may not have sound right now.
We have sound now. I think.
Probably.
We'll find out.
Well, to catch you up, if there was no sound, we were talking about survivorship bias. The thing I was just about to say.
We'll figure it out.
I can't even remember what the fuck I was going to say. What was I going to say?
The Bushido Bitcoin and that.
Oh, yeah, the Svetsky guy. He came up with this big, long thread about, like, if you think XYZ things, you've never led an organization. And if you find yourself in a position of power, like, everything comes with risk. It's so hard to move an organization. As I'm learning firsthand, like, trying to move a relatively small organization, it's just a continual fucking nightmare, dude. Mm-hmm. Because people are just, you just go, okay, I guess I'm, fuck. And that's your daily interaction with the world. It's just like, really? Fuck. Okay, let's try and figure out this fucking problem. And that's all it is. That's all my job is all day, every day, is just walk into a wall and go, okay, how do I get around this fucking wall? Okay, bonk. Oh, there's another one. Fuck, great. All right, let's go. Bonk. Oh, and then the whole while people are bitching at you and telling you what a fucking idiot you are because of all the things you're trying to do. And it's just like, Christ, man. Like, all right, well, I guess we'll just keep fucking tunneling forward.
And the way you do that was with a smile and charisma and a positive vision that you're communicating all the time, so that they don't know better, but they're hearing something they like, and you're putting on a show.
Oh, constantly, yeah.
I can't. So you got your family, your friends, your work peers, and partnerships.
Yeah.
And then, like in my role too, currently it's like, okay, you've got a caseload of people that you're also managing, or I have multiple caseloads, dozens. I hate to say how many people I manage. And I'll have people that like I previously managed or supervised or friends I haven't seen in a while, and my brain is full.
All right.
And I'll have a client who I hadn't seen in a while, and I cannot remember what in the hell their story is, but they know.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, hey, this and that and the other and all that stuff. And the best I can do really to be supportive is be agreeable.
Right.
And catch up if I remember. And there's times where we have a conversation, they come and go, and I'm like, what in the hell was that again? Yeah. Like, I know I did something, but that was a few years ago. And meanwhile, my queue and my stack was full and it piled off the top. My queue dripped off the bottom. And I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I met like someone had been released from the prison I worked at, and they were hanging out in front of our building. And I walked up and I go, oh my God, Mr. White, I literally had no idea who she could have been chewing on my leg. I wouldn't have recognized her. And so this is my reaction. Oh my God, hey, how's it going? It's good to see you. Mm-hmm. Oh, you got your kids back? Oh, whatever, because that's the job, right?
And it's not about me, it's about them. And,
right.
I mean, you get that a lot where they're excited to see you, and I don't know why, but I'm going to go with that because exactly. I can still learn something from them, or maybe I'll remember it was something, and
Yeah, totally, man. So, but that's kind of the gig, right? But that, as you were talking about, like if you're trying to marshal things forward, I actually just had this talk with this kid yesterday because he blew up at somebody and he was like threatening to beat up the teacher or something like that. I'm like, you can't fucking do that, dude. Like, the thing is the people I work with, they don't have the tools for expressing like frustration and anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. And I was literally telling him, because he was in a holding cell, I said, look, man, like, what happened today? He said, oh, well, this guy was pissing me off, so I told him I was going to beat his ass or something. I'm like, look, dude, I would rather you just told the guy, you're a fucking asshole, because that's just disruptive, but it's not a threat. Like, once you cross the threat line, then I have to go, we have to do something. We can't just go, oh, whatever, he's just threatening to beat the shit out of the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So when I rewinded a little bit, I said, look, man, if you can just get yourself away from the threat part and into just like, you're being a real fucking asshole right now. I think you're a fucking dick, and I wish you'd drop dead. Like, that's better. That's an improvement. Ideally, I'd like to get you to a place where you're saying stuff like, you're really frustrating me right now. It's causing me a lot of anxiety, and I can't focus anymore. Like, zero chance the kid's ever going to say that because he's a gangster, thug kid, whatever. But, but that's sort of the thing. But what I told him, my message to him was like, look, man, you're a smart kid. If you can learn how to communicate, the entire world runs on words. Like, everything that's happened all around you is somebody somewhere convinced somebody this shit was a good idea. And I said, look, man, like, I'm remodeling our whole facility. We got grant money coming in. I'm changing everything. new control structures, new this, new that, new holding cells, new cameras. I said, do you know how I did that? Just by convincing people it's a good idea. Like, it's just using words and marshaling support, getting people on board with an idea, and then kind of pushing them towards it. That's it. Mm-hmm. There was no, like, I don't have any secret sauce, no magic, anything. It's just my ability to communicate these ideas is the sole difference between me getting things accomplished and some guy that's just sitting there bitching about stuff. That's it.
That brings me, so we had lunch earlier this week, and we had a conversation I thought about on this thread where way back in history, people who, Easter Island built these tall statues that they half buried, and why? They built the pyramids, and we have ideas about why, but also like why. Large stone monuments, Göbekli Tepe and stuff.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
Like if you're doing well and whatever, and okay, but why this? So it's sort of like I feel like people have this energy or this grind, or if you don't have outlets or whatever, like productive outlets, or you just want to reading books, watching TV, trolling on Twitter. People sitting around just have something wanting to do, and leaders naturally fill that sort of role of people are and someone can just say, hey, let's all do something, and it doesn't even matter what it is, but it is something.
Yeah.
And people kind of glom onto that, like, hey, we're all doing something,
right?
And they do it.
Yeah,
I don't know. That related to me.
Well, I mean, but I remember we were talking about that because, like, if you look at there's a modern day tribe called the Hasda, and they live as hunter gatherers to this day. And you look and say, hey, how many amazing structures have you built? None. How many leaders do you have in your group? None. How do you guys decide things? Well, we just kind of figure stuff out. Oh, completely different social structure, no impetus or desire to build stone monuments, this, that, and the other thing, mm-hmm. which is what kind of gets me to the Graham Hancock thing, with the ancient apocalypse and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if there's any merit to what this guy's come up with or thinks about. I don't know. I think it's a compelling thing to think about and mm-hmm. to wonder about and to maybe look into. I don't know.
Like some of these things are way older than we want to presume on what we think happened.
Well, they're way older than what archaeologists have said. And like when they started talking about the Sphinx and the dating of the Sphinx, like that's all kinds of like contentious debate about when that actually gets dated. But Graham Hancock's core point is like, so what he's effectively saying, or what archaeologists are effectively saying, is that one day the Hasda woke up and said, everything's fine, we're all well fed, we're all getting along good, let's go build things and figure out engineering. And I look at that and I think, well, that's preposterous. There's been no time in human history where someone just made a hard right turn and just started doing random shit like that just 'cause, right? For 250,000 years, human beings lived exactly like the Hasda. They went out, they gathered stuff, they hung out together. There wasn't any sort of leadership or that's the chief. People think that shit, but it's not historically, archaeologically correct, I don't think. At least there's a significant body of evidence that that's not how hunter-gatherer tribes lived. And then 12,000 years ago, that suddenly shifted. It suddenly just turned into, we're going to start building shit and we're going to start growing stuff. So why that happened is because some leader came along and had this grand vision of, I get it now. We should, all those plants that are growing, we should just take the seeds from those plants and make them ourselves. And then cordon the land off and then till the ground and then build some structures to support it. And I think, well, that sounds kind of silly to me. Maybe that happened for...
It makes sense to me. Like, having... forms following needs for a function, and you're thinking about it. How do we keep this from going bad? Maybe if we put it out of the rain. Well, how do we do that? Let's build something to put the grain inside of a thing. And then, hey, we're building walls. Hey, walls are cool. And instead of just form following function, form starts becoming just sort of an interesting thing to be doing. I don't know.
Well, I get that idea. And I say, so what's the catalyst for that change? What changes 240,000 years of human history overnight? Simultaneously in several parts of the world, all at the same time.
The the weather or climate warmed up, and there's less need for struggle, or I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
So, and that's the Graham Hancock thing, is a lot of us, we imagine all this stuff sort of started to really grow after the Ice Age and things warmed up, and it all started like after that. But then, if I'm understanding correctly, isn't Hancock and others saying that no, this stuff is aged well before that, before the Ice Age?
Well, this is what the archaeologists say. 5,000 years ago, people started building temples and doing agriculture because hunter-gatherers woke up 4,999 years ago and figured all this stuff out overnight. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, they didn't know any of this shit. They were just wandering around picking nuts and berries and fucking shooting animals.
Sustaining and happy.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then Hancock comes along and goes, these structures are 7,000 years older than that. Mm-hmm. And they all went, you're full of shit, you're a dumbass, you fucking retard, what are you doing in our... Just stay in your own lane, journalist boy, blah, 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 blah. And then some other people started looking at it and went, oh, actually, he's right. Some of these structures are older. So it completely upsets the archaeological narrative. Agriculture, and because they all started right around where writing starts. Mm-hmm. But writing starts like 7,000 years after these buildings start and this agriculture starts. But then if you go back to the 12,000 year mark and you look around the world, according to Mr. Hancock, there are, like South America, they started building temples and doing agriculture. And in Africa, they started building temples and doing agriculture. And in the Middle East, they started building temples and doing agriculture. And in the Far East, they started building temples and doing agriculture. And in North America, they started building temples and doing agriculture. And so, widely distributed all around the world, just within a year or two, they all just figured out how to build things simultaneously around the world and do agriculture simultaneously around the world. For the previous 240,000 years before that, they were out picking berries and nuts and leaves and shooting animals and just kind of wandering around in tribes. But then suddenly, all of a sudden, overnight, 12,000 years ago, simultaneously, all these structures start appearing. And so if you look at that and you think, okay, well, the theory is everybody all around the world, all collectively at the same time, just happened to come up with engineering, complex agricultural practices, and they all did it because some leader said, well, since we're all not doing anything, but they weren't because they were out hunting and gathering up to that point, let's just do this now. Mm-hmm. Which I think just fundamentally from a common sense standpoint, I look at it and I go, well, that's just preposterous. Like, it's a preposterous notion to me. The archaeological narrative sounds preposterous. 5,000 years ago, they just suddenly came up with agriculture. Like, you don't just stumble into that. You don't just stumble into road farming. You don't just stumble into any of this shit. And to Hancock's point, he said there's no record of development of this stuff, where slowly over time, where people for the last 2,000 years slowly started planting things and slowly got into this and slowly started building structures. It's literally like a bright line mark.
Could that be because of the level of evidence we've been able to unearth through archaeological effort? Is that, okay, it's hard to find stuff buried who knows where in the ground, but when we find it, it's easier to find the most obvious stuff. So then we start finding archaeologically the most obvious stuff, and that's all the information we have. So everything that seems to be occurring is huge, and we don't know what all little stuff sort of maybe evolved.
That's precisely Graham Hancock's point, is the way the archaeological community would have done things is they found the most obvious things 5,000 years ago, the Great Pyramids, whatever. Mm-hmm. And they went, this is the start of agriculture. This is the start of building. Right. Before this, it was pure hunter-gatherers. Yeah. And they would say things like, hunter-gatherers did not have the ability to do this. And then suddenly they did.
Yeah. They're finding that some stuff started earlier and earlier than they thought.
Right. So if you find that 7,000 years prior to what the archaeologists used to think was the start of agriculture was actually the start of agriculture, but that leaves this whole swath of another 20,000 years before that we don't know. But if you're not looking at the 12,000 years before, then you can't see, because maybe there was a gradual progression from, 30,000 years ago, people were gradually learning how to do engineering, mm-hmm. and then all that's lost to something, and then 12,000 years ago, you just get the structure. You go, oh, well, maybe the hunter-gatherers had been building it all along. Mm-hmm. Graham Hancock's theory takes it to the next sort of, metaphysical leap, where it says, oh, this was Great Flood, and da-da-da-da.
There was an ice age, and that broke, and there were these great floods.
Well, it's not ice age, because ice age ended like 50,000 years ago.
I thought it was like 15,000.
No, it was like 50.
50?
Yeah.
I got to look that up.
Well, let's look it up. There's Google's right there.
So, well, like here in the Columbia Gorge, the ice age floods. people live here and they have no idea how the gorge is how it is. I think they think steady erosion. Or
Right.
it is legit cataclysmic floods that huge ice dam up in Montana and backwaters and up in Canada. And as the Ice Age ended, and I swear, I want to say it was like 15 to 12,000 years ago, but anyway, there's this period of time when the Ice Age was ending that the dam broke, and the amount of water, as much as all the Great Lakes combined, flooded across northern Idaho, eastern Oregon and Washington, and then scoured through the channel of the Columbia Gorge now. And
that is a contentious point.
Right there. Is it?
100%.
Really? You tell me about that. I'm going to look it up.
You should watch the Joe Rogan interview with the guy from Skeptic and Graham Hancock and a couple of geologists that came on.
11,700 years ago.
115,000 to...
Oh, that's a range.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a range of 115,000 years ago to 12,000 years ago.
But that's the point, is that 12,000 year, that's the dam break theory.
Right.
That said that created all those badlands in Washington.
Yeah, the scablands.
Scablands, exactly.
There's so the Willamette Valley, all this fertile ground and land and stuff, it's swept all this earth from eastern Oregon and Washington, muddy water through the gorge. It just sort of churned around in the Willamette Valley and dropped off
stuff.
Good fertile earth. A lot of it ended up out in the ocean.
Well, but that's you've literally stumbled right into the cornerstone sticking point of the geologist, the archaeologist, everybody, right? Because the Graham Hancocks and the geologists that support his worldview say that was a meteor strike in the northern American continent that released all of that water simultaneously all at once. It wasn't like some dam broke and then the water flooded and then another dam formed and then another dam broke and then it flooded again. And then that's the current geological sort of theory that underpins that dating.
Right. That there's thoughts that there were a series of floods that it broke, it flooded, but refroze and held back again, and then it broke again, and it was just kind of over the course of like maybe 1,000 years. But there were many floods and little.
Right. And so the contentious part of that is the flip side of those guys is saying, no, we found these little like globules that show evidence of impact strikes, and we have this, and we have this, and we have this. And so there are a growing body of geologists that are saying that's a fundamentally flawed theory, that there were successive dam breaks that created the scablands and things like that. And but these people are arguing about it. It's not settled science, right? It's not like gravity. Mm-hmm. They go, we know what happened here. There are very reasonable minds that differ on that timeline of things and what created those structures and brought the soil into the Willamette Valley and all of that stuff. And so that is that point of contention, like, because a lot of what Hancock theorizes, with very scant evidence, I would point out, is that if there were civilizations that were living in low-lying areas, because that's where people tend to create civilizations, right, near the water.
Near the water, yep.
And that all got, and
they got swept away.
If they got swept away, then it's really hard to find that information.
Yeah.
Right?
The archaeological record out here only goes back to 12,000 years ago, because it is in the ocean gone.
Right. Well, not only here, but if you think about, like, all these areas around the globe that used to be above water are now submerged. You go, was it possible that some of those places held civilization? And how would you find it? Because just getting to the bottom of the ocean is a problem. Never mind getting to the bottom of the ocean and then digging around for things. That's a whole next level.
And the erosion from the water, I mean, just stuff's getting...
Yeah, and the amount of sediment that settles on top of it, I mean, it's gone for all intents and purposes. Maybe someday, somehow, they'll come up with something. But to trace it all the way back to the start of the conversation, if you make the assumption that there was a dam break, and if you make the assumption that, the skeptic guy says, hey, I get where you guys are coming from, but we don't have evidence of this chain of causality. Just like they're saying, well, we appreciate what you say, but you don't have evidence of this chain of causality. So what's missing is that causal chain, because there's just vastly huge sections of chain that nobody knows what happened or how it happened, whatever. So what you're left to start debating, like with Graham Hancock, he says, I think there was an ancient civilization that floated ashore after the Great Flood. A handful of survivors managed to escape from these places, came ashore and went, oh man, I don't want to go back to hunter-gathering. Well, hey, let's just gather up all the natives and bamboozle them with some flashy stuff. Like, we'll show them a big lighter and, we'll take some pictures or something like that with our advanced technology. And then we'll teach them how to build some stuff because we don't want to live this way. Because we've understood engineering and agriculture for 25,000 years when we were wandering around in our Flintstones cars in Atlantis or whatever. I don't know what it is, right?
So around the world, various cultures living that survived all this stuff were seeded with the knowledge from another group that got scattered.
Correct. That's his basic theory.
Yeah.
Which is, I give it a plausibility rating of 5 out of 10. Who fucking knows? I don't know.
Where they came from, the Atlantis idea is that they came from an area that has been lost,
right,
washed away in the flood.
Correct. So here's the grand theory summed. Great big comet hit the Earth, caused massive global flooding, and all these advanced societies that had sort of cropped up all around the world got flooded out. Very few of them survived. The ones that did survive floated ashore in their little boats or whatever that they survived with, and then they imparted knowledge on the locals. Hey, we need to build a temple here. And because they were of very large stature, and they had all this advanced knowledge, and they just sort of appeared magically, like these beings just came from the sea that were 2 meters taller than us, or a foot taller than us, or 2 feet taller than us, or whatever it was. And they had all this amazing knowledge of things, and they built these incredible ships that floated across the sea. And so we worshiped them as gods, because when we saw them and they came along and they went, we are gods, and they had some booming, who knows, right? But that's the theory. Comet strike, these civilizations are wiped out, the survivors washed ashore all around the world, and simultaneously imparted knowledge on all these different cultures. But then if you trace the Hancock theory, he says, look, there's a flood myth in South America. There's a flood myth with a god coming from the sea. There's a flood myth in the Middle East. There's a flood myth in Africa. There's a flood myth in Indonesia. There's a flood myth in North America. There's a flood. Every spot on the globe has a flood myth with a ship of some sort that brings knowledge ashore with these big, powerful people. From Noah to the people in South America to whatever gods they've named. All at once, the same type of mythology, the same type of story, the same type of narrative. At the same time, agriculture and large structures start appearing all around the world simultaneously.
Occam's razors say, what's more likely? That happened, or that galactic observers or a planet X on its long orbit came around and they were aliens and they landed on Earth and they saw these smart monkeys and they decided to hang out for a while and get something done and have some fun, and then decided, okay, we're done, and they leave. And then we were given that gift,
yeah.
And what we have left behind is trying to sort out what in the heck happened. How do we figure all this out? It must have been aliens. That makes more sense, doesn't it?
Well, I think Occam's razor would probably favor the flood story.
Okay.
Right.
On the other side of Occam's razor, let's say Joseph Campbell, and he wrote a book, The Mask of Gods, or I think it was like the Mask of Gods. Anyway, that down deep, and maybe who's that? The psychologist speaker, Peterson. No, Jordan Peterson. So Jordan Peterson, Joseph Campbell. I go to these places where down deep inside people are these sort of memes or ideas. You wrestle with life challenges, good things, bad things, good and evil, character types, sort of archetypes that you see in people, the 7 deadly sins or good qualities, and that we naturally construct these masks or these sort of gods based around, greed, jealousy, fear, opulence, whatever. And that we kind of fall into these tropes of ideas that we give meaning to, and they can become these gods or ideas, and that maybe naturally humans have these ideas down deep inside them from emotions and survival, but we create caricatures about it that we just naturally create. And with that, we I don't know, we have stories involving fire, water, wind, the earth. I don't know.
Well, what I can say with a high degree of certainty is those notions are very Euro-Western centric, like across the board. And understandably, because those are the people that have been documenting this stuff and thinking about this stuff and yada, yada, yada for the last few hundred years, right? And if you go look at Chinese history, I don't know if it holds true. If you look at Native American history, I don't know if it holds true. If you look at South American history, I don't know if it holds true. If you look at African history, I don't know if it holds true. If you look at Indian history, I don't know if it holds true. If you look at Middle Eastern history, I don't know if it holds true. Places that adopt Abrahamic religions tend to follow those types of tropes and have those sort of things. So is it inbuilt? I don't know. What I can say is Dr. Robert Sapolsky, the behavioral biologist guy, says, no, not true at all. And he says you can find people that come from religious traditions that were born amongst pastoralist tribes, people that would shepherd things like goats and sheep and shit like that, tend to have vengeance-based societies, right? But he says you can actually trace out, like, a woman born today in that type of mindset, with that type of God, with that type of ideology and philosophy behind it, actually holds her infant for less time than a woman that was not born under those conditions. So behaviorally, biologically, they are wired differently, just slightly. But it's enough to have profound impacts throughout history and throughout time and throughout behavioral, or at least through human development.
Child development.
Right? So you can say those things. Like Jordan Peterson has his head firmly planted into the world of Christian theology. And he's got much ado about patternicity with that guy as well. He was talking to some British philosopher guy, like he was just haranguing him. I mean, it's the most embarrassing sort of interview I've ever heard because he just said, the guy told Peterson to his face, I think you're full of beans. Like you're just creating a whole bunch of shit out of nothing. You're seeing a bunch of patterns that aren't there. And then Peterson was just like, I remember seeing the video and I was like, oh man, I really want to hear this discussion. And what it is Peterson just going, here's my idea, here's my thing. The guy would try and say two sentences and he'd just talk right over him and just keep pushing his ideas on this guy because he so desperately wanted this guy to get on board with what he was saying. And I wish the guy would have just sat back and listened. I can't remember the philosopher's name, but I mean, he's a brilliant thinker. He's not like some potato. And obviously Jordan Peterson looks up to him and thinks he's worth talking to. But the guy still thinks Jordan Peterson is just a fucking moron, right? So,
I don't know about Chinese culture, but I can think of like, okay, so like you've got your, in European side, you had your Loki and your trickster. And in Native American cultures, they have their coyote or the raven. So there's characters that fit these styles, but I mean...
Well, that depends on your starting point, right? Like, that hugely depends on your starting point. Because if you go back to where hunter-gatherers dominated Europe, it's a very, 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 very different sort of look and feel to their religious traditions than after the pastoralist driven agricultural societies started permeating outwards, right? And you have parallel development of agricultural societies, like in the East and in like the areas around Rome, right? And as they both blossomed, they both came with very, very similar sort of social structures, very, very similar sort of attitudes, very similar philosophies. They had art, they had agriculture, they had aqueducts, they had running water, bathing, all this sort of stuff. Where it diverged here was the pastoralists came in and took over this thought process. The pastoralists never made it to the East. You see what I'm saying? So think about when Christ came to Rome. I mean, if you go watch the old, Saturnalis and all that sort of stuff, like, why did the Romans adopt Christianity? Because that ideology was overwhelming their philosophical systems, their ideological systems, and their governance and structural systems. So as a natural consequence of this religious theocracy coming in, they shifted the way they viewed things. They adopted it as state religion. In the East, they did not. So when you see the divergence in that development, it goes a very different way. But both, prior to the adoption of that pastoralist-based religious traditions, they both had very similar development trajectories. They both had very similar civilizing trajectories. It's just China right now has got 5,000 years of relatively uniform development. Whereas if you look what happened from ancient Rome to today, it's completely different, right? Mm-hmm. So, but this became the dominant ideology around the world. Like that Christian theocracy, Christian theology, Christian ideology, and philosophy became the dominant religion on top of agricultural practices that I think were coming up before the advent of this. So that's a major divergence, I think, in the development of society around the world.
And comparatively, in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, before European contact, all this stuff was going on for a long time in the other parts of the globe. But if the theory of maybe they came across the ocean, the Bering Strait, whatever, but people came to the North American continent, theoretically, I don't know if you want to say during the Ice Age, but could be before that.
It's all in debate.
We don't know.
None of it is settled, right?
But in America, so in South America, you do have these large stone structures and stuff. North America, there's some mounds and stuff that they made, but there's not a lot of, in all the span of human history around, there wasn't that seemingly, like, let's build stuff up.
Not true.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, that's the Graham Hancock thing again. He has pointed 2 sites in North America. So there you go. It's the same exact thing.
I've heard of the mound building and stuff.
But they're not mounds if you look deeper and you look at the way they're arranged and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that can be patternicity, too. That can just be Graham Hancock coming up with some shit and putting 2 and 2 together and getting 24. But the point being, for him, and the reason why this is a contentious point, is because he is alleging the same development occurred here 12,000 years ago as occurred in South America 12,000 years ago as occurred in Egypt 12,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So
it was happening in the Americas, just in different ways.
Not according to Graham Hancock. That's the whole point. Is like we do ourselves a huge disservice by saying this is the way things happened, and digging our heels into that because we don't know. I mean, the ultimate correct answer for every question on planet Earth right now, except for gravity, and, well, basically gravity and light, is we don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really hard to say. And if you're talking about something soft that is reliant on a historical record or a narrative or anything else, the amount of things we don't know far eclipses what we do.
Sure.
So it requires a lot of humility and just go, well, like to say, oh, the Ice Age ended here. Well, you can't really say that.
Right.
I mean, you can try, but then it gets falsified 10 years from now. And you go, oh, okay, well, the Ice Age ended here. Well, it's probably going to get falsified again. And civilization started here, and that's going to get falsified. I mean, these are all falsifiable, but they're theories still. They're not, it's not gravity. It's not, we know these forces exist because of this, right? It's not a fundamental force of nature.
Yeah, at least where we live, I mean, we could say the Ice Age flood stuff ended around, say, 12,000 years ago or so. And what do we see on the landscape culturally that reflects much of people living here? It's some pictographs and petroglyphs, some small mounds, which were like trash middens. But there's not a lot here that really stands out. Like there's all this columnar basalt and rocks and stuff, and there aren't little pyramids built or walls.
Graham Hancock would fundamentally disagree with you. He would come and tell you how wrong you are right now and how little you understand about the world. That is 100% what he would tell you.
Well, at least here, I don't know where they are. I don't know what the structures are. I haven't seen them.
So. Well, but that's what I'm saying is like just because you haven't seen something doesn't necessarily mean it didn't exist. And he is coming along and saying, hey, in North America, there are these structures. They exist right here. You can go find them right now. You can go look, and they're there, and people choose not to because his argument is that they do it because of their academic insufferability. They just won't explore it because, the skeptic guy was saying that's fucking idiotic. If they found evidence of this, they would be all over it. And so they sit there and dicker about whether or not academics give a shit about any of this stuff. My point isn't whether or not you're right or wrong, because I don't know either. I get what you're saying 100%.
We don't have pyramids out here or large
that
rocks
you're aware of, that you've seen, that you know about. That's what I'm getting at. It's like if you say they don't exist, I go, well, you can't really say that.
Yeah, I don't know that they exist out here.
Right.
We found them elsewhere, but
well, that's my point. Is Graham Hancock, if he was sitting in this chair right now, so
I would say if there were large rock structures out here or pyramids, we'd have found them.
He says he has. That's my point. I mean, it's not. I don't.
My frame of reference is like, okay, Oregon and Washington.
Well, I mean,
where are they?
I know.
I don't know.
But that, like you can't. I could just say, hey, Tesla trucks don't exist. Why not? Well, I looked all around. I don't see them. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, just because you personally haven't.
Pyramids stand out. Like,
well, you're an N of one, and whether they've been eroded or covered by dirt or covered by that same flood that we were talking about, all possibilities.
Maybe.
That structure in Göbekli Tepe or whatever was covered for thousands of years. Nobody knew it was down there, but now all of a sudden everybody knows it's there. Graham Hancock's point is if you go to, I think it's Arkansas or I don't know where the fuck it is.
Yeah, there's some in Ohio and...
right. But those people today go, that's just a mount. But they said the same thing about Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah, there's a long, big serpent thing. And...
Well, he says there's structures underneath that. Is his contention that they won't let him look at, right? Whether that's true or not, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. What I do know is that guy has spent way more time thinking about this stuff, looking at this stuff, and trying to piece this together than I have, ever will, or ever want to. And I can give the guy the benefit of the doubt and go, well, it's a possibility that he's right. So to say that didn't happen here, I go, well, we can't really say that yet. Until that is a falsified sort of theory, until you can reliably falsify Graham Hancock's theory, I think his theory is just as valid as anybody else's out there, which is that it didn't happen here. But to the skeptic's point, he said, look, man, every year someone comes along and says, hey, there's this new fucking theory about when humans first got here. And then it gets falsified, like, very shortly after. They screwed up the carbon dating. They got this wrong. They misattributed this as a tool mark when it was really a cut mark or a bone mark or a break or whatever. There's all sorts of falsification processes that happen. So I hear the skeptic guy and I go, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I hear Graham Hancock and I go, yeah, it makes sense. I hear the people that are arguing against the geologist and I go, yeah, he's got a good argument. And I hear the geologist arguing for and I go, he's got a good argument too. So yeah. But if you have an idea that's in contention, that's my point, is to just step back and go, well, I don't see it, so it doesn't exist. You're not thinking about it hard enough.
Yeah, the obvious stuff that we found elsewhere, and less so in North America so far, it seems, would be like the large stone structures. Yeah.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. It's like there are large stone structures that people thought were hills for thousands of years. They went, oh, that's just a hill. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, gradually they went, oh, that's not just a hill, that's actually a temple. And then they look even harder and they go, oh my God, it's not just a hill, it's not just a temple, that thing goes down 500 feet. Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
The Easter Island heads, they found like, oh, these aren't just heads, these are whole bodies that were intentionally buried.
Right.
Why? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing I'm getting to is like, is it possible that there's a hill in America, maybe even around here in Oregon, where someone, if they really started digging, because maybe someone's going to go develop a hill and they're going to start digging away and they go, oh shit, there's a fucking temple here.
Maybe.
And then that entire thesis you just came up with, I don't see it around here. I think a temple would stand out. I think a pyramid would stand out. You go, oh, it's all gone, right?
Yeah. And I'm not saying they don't exist. It's just we haven't maybe found them yet. Göbekli Tepe, for example. What's interesting I find about that, one, our time frame on how old this kind of stuff started, how old it is, when all this was happening, goes back much further back. And that Göbekli Tepe, it would appear, I think what I understand about it is that it was built, used for a long time, all this stuff, and then like intentionally buried. Like actually people introduced material to bury the thing, is what I've heard as the current theory. So here's this thing, it was built, whatever, and then for some reason they actually buried it.
Well, like you said,
that's weird.
It's not just the current theory; it's a current theory, right? I mean, there's dozens and dozens of theories around that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I would encourage you to, if you can watch a bunch of really smart people bicker for 3 hours, because they really are just bickering the whole time, like just straight up bickering, and they bicker about really stupid shit during the Joe Rogan show. But you should watch that and just...
The skeptic and Hancock?
The skeptic, Hancock, and then the skeptic geologist versus the non-skeptic geologist, and the evidence they produce. I would encourage you to watch the Ancient Apocalypse series, because he does a really good job, but it's a fucking entertainment show, right? So it's not...
Well, and there's a documentary bias too. Any documentary you see, can convince you of anything the documentary is about at the time, and you say,
Correct.
that makes sense. I saw a documentary on that. I think that's true.
That's exactly what I was pointing out.
Yeah, documentaries just give you that bias because you're seeing that lens.
Right.
But that's it.
With that context.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm getting at is like if you take those together and then you watch anything else or you go read any of the archaeological stuff, I mean, you can start coming up with an idea of your own, and you might agree with the archaeologists and go, nope, they're right. These guys are fucking lunatics. I don't know. I have enough of the orientation to go, I don't know. Like
I know enough to know that I don't know.
Yeah.
So, but
100%.
One thing I took away from it is that I think this stuff is just, it's much older than we thought it was. The Sphinx alone, it's like this big lion body with this funny little pharaoh face on it that got carved away later.
Yeah.
And so whatever it was probably a little different than what it is now. And the erosion around it appears to be flood erosion down at the base versus sand-blown wind erosion at the top.
Right.
So like floods happening around that thing, which happened how much earlier than even the pyramids were. Like the Sphinx was out there early, and we're talking pre-Ice Age, right, or during the Ice Age. I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, there's, like I said, there's as I've listened to Mr. Hancock, he takes a bunch of logical leaps. He does display a lot of patternicity, and he does make a lot of pretty grand assumptions about things. But then I look at the archaeologists and I go, you guys are doing the exact same thing. Right?
Using science.
Well, that's where
science.
They start
the process of science itself being like we want to know answers, and the science we just don't know enough information to have maybe a theory that is right yet.
Any of this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
We don't know.
Yeah, and that's the problem of falsifiability with all these, especially the soft sciences, archaeology, geology. Those are very much soft sciences, right? Like they can drill down and figure out globules and look at electron scanning microscope images of globules and say, well, this looks like a globule from a nuclear explosion, this looks like a globule from an impact, and this looks like a globule from erosion, from flood erosion, right? They look very different, and they look very similar under electron microscopes between this and this. And so the one guy says this is definitive proof of a meteor strike or a comet strike. The other guy will say, well, you could do that and da-da-da. But now we're talking down to the granular sub-electron size particles that these guys are debating about, but there's no clear answer to it.
Like around the world, is it at the same time frame that we're finding these radiological particles from, say, a meteor or
right? Well,
an alien nuke, whatever, I don't know.
Well, not alien. They all universally are dickering between whether it's the result of geologic forces or impact forces.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact force guys is a small group that's growing, and the geologic forces group is the large sort of body that is the consensus view, is what you might say. So the thing I'm getting at is like physics. I love physics because it is so granular and it's so falsifiable, right? Geology, archaeology, super hard to falsify, super hard to figure out if a theory is good or not, or sound or not, and it relies a lot on heuristics and assumptions. Economics, not even a fucking science, not even close. You start getting into psychology and all that, sociology. It's just you may as well just be guessing.
The arguments around these kinds of topics where there's, perhaps heady implications about our origins and the meaning of things and
right,
and what happened, you see it play out to this day on all kinds of stuff. So, okay, the recent shots heard around the world a week ago, man, the amount of information out there spinning over what happened and people deciphering all this stuff, and we have all this evidence and yada yada. People are arguing or needing to know or have an opinion about it and taking a side this way or that way.
Right.
The lone shooter. No, there was more than one shooter. Why did this happen? Why did that happen? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
There's chaos involved here, and yet we need to know what happened and what makes sense. And so when we're connecting these dots without all the information at hand, you can come to crazy conclusions if you want to.
Oh, super easy. Yeah.
So I see it happening now. I've seen very interesting evidence on last night I was listening to a guy, and if I look at the channel, I'd be like, oh man, it's full of this drama, cataclysmic stuff,
right.
and conspiracy theory stuff,
right.
the whole conspiracy theory thing. And yet there was a video that was quite compelling where he had recorded audio from two sites. One was in the field or the lawn near where the building was, where the shooting occurred on the rooftop, one of the shootings at least. Audio recording from that.
Right.
And then audio recording on the other side in the audience, and then playing the audios side by side. And when you have two different locations of audio recording, and then you hear the noise come to you, breaking the speed barrier followed by the noise of the shot.
Right.
And there's a little, so like the first three shots that you would say came from the roof of Crooks. It's like a shot sounds like snap of the breaking the sound barrier,
right.
as it is near you, snap, bang,
right.
as you hear the muzzle blast. So snap, bang, snap, bang, snap, bang.
Right.
That timing, so there's the first three shots, a slight delay, and then a series of like 5 shots, bang, 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 bang.
Right.
And then, so it was like 3, and then a cluster of 5, and then like a half second and a ninth shot. 3, 5, and then...
I thought it was an 8th. I think I saw this video. But
okay, so whether it was like an initial 7 or 8, and then an 8th or a 9th just at the tail end of it. The first 3 sync up the same way, right? But then in the middle, there's a disparity in the snap bangs, which would indicate different sources for different shots occurring. So there's the theory that there were 2 separate sites where some shooting was happening.
So let me ask you this. What do you think of that theory, first of all?
I find it very compelling and interesting.
What makes it compelling to you?
Because not knowing anything about audio sciences or how you forensically decipher that stuff, I'd say, hey, if you're recording 2 separate places of audio and then you sync up how that sounded at these 2 locations and they're consistent and then not in the middle, I'd say, well, not knowing anything else, it would sound like the source of those snap bangs came from different places. So not knowing anything else about it, I'd say, well, there could have been a second shooter.
Right.
I don't know.
Well, you could just strip away all the artifice and just go, well, there could be 2 shooters, right?
Yeah.
So what?
There could be 2 shooters.
So what would falsify that theory? How would you falsify that idea?
Something about a science-oriented explanation about how acoustics work in that kind of a situation. If you take these recordings and how that makes sense. Is there something I don't know about an echo? Or honestly, I don't know what I don't know. So at this point, I don't know.
So you don't know any way to falsify the theory, and you find it compelling, right?
Right, because I'm not going to say, well, because I don't know something, I'm going to believe that. Versus, well, with what I know, it makes sense to the science that I'm aware of. Like, no, based on the science that I know.
What science do you know?
That that sound travels so fast. So there's a difference between a local sound barrier break sound versus the follow-up muzzle blast sound.
Okay.
So there's a different. So you can tell how far someone shot from if you capture the noise of the bullet traveling near you, and then you get the muzzle blast sound. So you can tell how far somebody shot from based on the snap bang of a shot. So there's some science.
That is,
and if you
had... Wait. Before you go, that's some science. So, just so I understand, I just want to be sure I'm hearing what you're saying correctly. It's similar to, the effect you're describing is similar to lightning strike. You see the lightning, and then you hear the lightning.
Flash, wait for it, bang. Okay, how far away was that?
The assumption we're making right now is that bullet was traveling supersonic. It broke the sound barrier, created the telltale snap, and then the report traveled slower because it's moving at the speed of sound.
Right.
So I'm caught up with you right now. Right?
Yeah.
The science that you're quoting is assuming that the bullet is traveling supersonic, it got to that microphone at a certain time, and from that we can extrapolate distance.
Yep.
Okay, I'm with you 100%.
So if you say you record an audio and you get snap bang, snap bang, snap bang, and then a snap bang, well, that was 100 feet further away, that other shot, compared to the... So you have snap bang, snap bang, snap bang, snap bang, snap bang.
So,
what different source here, right?
All right. So is the bang you're hearing similar to the bangs you heard earlier?
That was another thing that was mentioned, was that the bangs that occurred were different in echo effect than earlier ones.
Echo effect or amplitude?
I don't know. I can't remember what it was.
Because I heard the audio that you're referring to.
Okay.
And what I can report from my own clearly biased and very subjective hearing, because I'm not analyzing it in terms of waveform analysis, I'm just analyzing it based on my own hearing. I heard what that guy reports is an unmistakable sonic crack and a delayed report that sounded to me like it was the same amplitude and volume as all the other reports. So if we take your theory as true, just without anything else, just leave the rest of the hyperbole out of it, and I say, okay, that other report was from a weapon that was 100 feet further away. Do you think, knowing nothing else, that the report from 150 feet away is going to sound the same, have the same amplitude and same volume as a report that was made from 250 feet away?
I'd say they would sound differently.
Significantly, right?
Yeah.
Like if you heard a gun crack from 500 feet down the road versus right outside, the one right outside would be significantly louder and significantly higher amplitude and volume than the one that happened way down the street.
Right.
So if there was a source for that report that sounds the same, but the bullet is traveling at a different rate, how do you account for that?
I don't know.
Correct. I don't know either. Or is it possible, are you able to, just by listening, distinguish between a sonic crack and the sound of a ricochet flying by?
I don't. I think the knowledge may be out there in comparing lots of things like that, but I don't know what it is.
Well, I've heard both, and I can say they sound very similar.
Okay.
Zzz, zzz. Ooh, what was that? Fucking ricochet, dude. Oh my god, really? Versus shoot that rifle over my head. Zzz. Oh, fuck, dude, that's crazy. Right? Not the brightest idea to go be hiding behind shit and having people shooting over your head, but I've done it just to hear what the sonic crack sounds like. I've also been at shooting ranges and had things like 9mm come flying back, and they have, because they're spinning and tumbling and doing all sorts of weird shit, and their aerodynamics are all fucked up. Zzz.
When I've experienced ricochet effects, they're very immediate after, like, shot, snap, bang, ricochet, zzz, right there. And these sounds like bang, 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 bang. So that's just this.
Okay, so the point I'm getting at with this whole experiment that we're going through right now is I have just presented to you the potential falsifiability of that thing that you're immediately rejecting.
I'm not rejecting. I'm just saying I don't know, but based on what I know, it could be that there were two shooters. I'm not saying there is or there isn't. I'm just saying from what I understand about sound and shooting, it's a possibility. I can't say no, there were not two shooters because maybe.
Well, that is where you get into the fundamental trap that all of this stuff gets into. Is now you start going, prove there's not two shooters, and that is a problem already. That's why we don't use that in legal terms. Prove you didn't commit a crime, because it is nearly impossible. It is impossible to prove a negative. Prove something didn't happen. And once you get into the rabbit hole of prove it didn't happen, prove there weren't two shooters, then all of a sudden the job for you is to prove there were two shooters. Not you, but the guy has to prove definitively, beyond a reasonable doubt, that there were two shooters. So he has to have enough compelling evidence to overcome any objections that are reasonable.
So could you say, I'm not here to say, yes, there were two shooters, But here's some evidence conducive to the idea that there could have been. We're not saying, nope, prove it wrong. It's more like,
no,
hey,
no, it is. It was 100%. There could have been means in order for you to now falsify my theory, you have to prove there were not. There could have been, prove they weren't.
Couldn't you say, prove there was one shooter? How can you prove there was one shooter? Prove it.
Well, it's easier to prove a positive than a negative. It's possible to prove that there was one shooter. The problem you get into is if you get into the logical loop of going, prove there weren't two shooters, anything you say that says, no, this is more likely than not one shooter. It is beyond a reasonable doubt that there is one shooter. You can always retreat to prove there weren't two, though.
Right.
Because I've got all these things that point to a thing that could be true, prove that's not true. That's where that path leads. And once you get into prove it didn't happen, then you get into the realm of anything could have happened.
So is it okay in a scientific process to say, hey, here's this interesting evidence, we don't know what it means, but similar situations can look like this alternative idea? We're not saying you got to prove it wrong, but we're trying to understand what happened here.
The effect of that statement and the way that guy framed that video and the way that guy did all of that stuff is not to try and find some falsifiability for it. It is not a scientific inquiry at all, under any way, shape, or form. It is 100% from an emotional place that says, I believe something bigger is going on here, and I'm going to try and bring up all these things that make it look like it, and no one can ever falsify my theory, ever.
Well, maybe it could be based on audio forensics that say, oh, no, here is a way that happens.
Right, and then that
can happen.
That person can always come back and say something else. Here's
sure.
all the reasons why that's not true.
So I'm not saying that.
I know you're
He's saying that, but I'm saying, hey, there's some interesting evidence of trying to understand what happened. Right now, we know there was one shooter. Is there evidence to show?
We don't necessarily know that either. That's my point. They have the job of falsifying all the counter theories, right? They have the job of falsifying their own theory. They need to be able to back down those objections. If you have people that you're trying to convince of the authenticity of their narrative, then if they are predisposed to a counter narrative that can never be falsified, then you're always stuck in a loop that will last forever and ever and ever. It'll never, ever, ever get resolved because there will always be somebody that's always suggesting. It doesn't matter how much evidence you put in front of them. Unless you have a godlike view on the world, if you are heuristically biased, and if you are ideologically biased, and if you are seeking a counter narrative, then you can never be falsified. So that's the complaint about Graham Hancock, because he is now down this thing that is really hard to falsify what he's saying. It's impossible, which is what the skeptic guy argues. Which is why I look at Graham Hancock and his theories as highly suspect. They sound plausible, just like it sounds plausible that there could be two shooters.
That's the same approach I have with it. Is that, yeah, I feel the same about Graham Hancock stuff, where I find it compelling, interesting. I entertain learning more about what could be, but I'm not saying, no, you still have to prove it. Otherwise, it didn't happen. Well, because that's the legacy kind of archaeology of like, well, no, you'd have to prove that it didn't all start when we think it did.
Well, my point is if we continue down that path, there could have been two shooters. Then you're stuck in that realm forever. Like you can never get yourself back out of there. Because
well, I'm not stuck.
I'm not saying you're stuck.
I know that people do that. People do that. They're hanging their hat. I got this theory, and everything else that I ever hear, I'm just going to fit into how it fits that theory, regardless of things. So yes, people do that.
100%.
I'm not doing that. I just like to know. Well, gee, there's some interesting evidence of something that.
Well, I would trace you back to your beginning statement of this whole thing, where you say there is some compelling evidence that says there are two shooters. Right? I say
possibly.
Well, you didn't say possibly.
Okay, I'm saying possibly. I'm not saying there's two shooters, folks.
Well,
I don't know. Like, I have not seen pyramids.
Right.
I don't know that there are pyramids, and you're saying, well, there could be. Well, yeah, maybe. We haven't seen that, right?
I didn't say there could be. I absolutely did not say there could be. What I said was there is a person that is somewhat credible that says there are.
Okay. And this guy says
that guy is not credible at all.
Okay.
Because that is a guy, if you say, what are your bona fides for analyzing audio information? 0. He literally says on tape, I loaded this in a program called Audacity. You go, oh, you mean that open source software from ages ago that is going to give you rudimentary waveform information, but it's not going to tell you anything else.
Well, I could show you snap bangs, and there's recordings that, they follow a time lane, snap bang, different snap bang.
So here, if you really want to make that a scientific inquiry, what load was he using? What length barrel was he shooting from? What angle was he coming from? What direction was the wind blowing? What was the ambient air temperature? What was the humidity level? What was the density of the air? What was the elevation density of that shot? Where exactly was the microphone? What sensitivity was that microphone? What off-axis rejection did that microphone have? What other sources of pollution can you have to this data that you collected? Snap, bang, snap, bang, snap, bang. That is very dirty data. There's nothing controlled in that data whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you take the assumption that I'm assuming that this was this round. I'm assuming that this came from here. I'm assuming this shot means this. I'm assuming this shot means this. I'm assuming there were no other rounds being fired from Secret Service that were creating reports at a simultaneous time or overlapping times or that happened in the trajectory between. I'm going to assume all of these things are true. Therefore, I think snap bang means this.
Yeah. We can only do our best with the evidence we have, which is
none. We have no evidence whatsoever.
And legacy archaeologists do the same to Graham Hancock, where Graham Hancock is trying to just do his best with ideas and stuff. And they're like, so prove to me what kind of sediment it is, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, it doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm looking at the big picture here. And it's a compelling idea. It's enough for a series on Netflix.
Well, but that's because they can see viewership in it. For this very reason. We're talking about it right now.
Yep.
That is the level of scientific inquiry that went into Ancient Apocalypse. And his stuff is very falsifiable, and people keep continually trying to falsify his stuff. He's all bent out of shape because they won't take him seriously. The skeptic guy says, look, dude, every day some fucking clown comes up with some fucking theory about how archaeology developed, and they go and tell all the scientists, look,
you're all wrong.
My old roommate came up with a theory about the fucking clouds used to hold water, and there was this, and he goes, I've disproven the and he says this shit seriously, fully believes this. He wrote a book that said, I've factually disproved the origins of the Grand Canyon. I go, fuck, dude. So you're telling me the guy who's got 0 geological experience, 0 erosion experience, 0 archaeological experience, are the one brilliant guy in the world that has upset the entire field of geology because you thought it.
Well, J. Harlan Bretz did that with the Ice Age floods here in the gorge, where he did the same thing. He had now he had lots of evidence, and he traveled all over and collected evidence. But when he presented the geologists of the time, I don't know, was it 100 years ago? But they call them the Bretz floods sometimes, the Ice Age floods, the Bretz floods, because J. Harlan Bretz went to the archaeologist and said, hey, I have all this compelling evidence about the scab lands and water erosion things back in Missoula, Montana, all the way out to the Willamette Valley in the Pacific Ocean that shows a cataclysmic flood. And they're like, nope. The Columbia Gorge is like the Grand Canyon. It was slow, steady erosion over all this time.
Right. And
they're just like, nope, because technically, gotcha. What's your credentials again? Blah, blah, blah. And they overwhelmed him with this guild of archaeologists that shut him out. And he was a guy with less cred, but had done some proof of work and was against just the popular opinion. And they shut him out, and eventually they had to, after he was dead, they said, oh, we were wrong.
Right. Well, I'm going to trace us back to survivorship bias, because that one guy, out of the probably 100,000 people that have come up with counter theories to geological evidence, he's the one guy that came out of that. So if we point to that and go, see, this is evidence of sometimes people are right. Well, that one guy happened to survive out of the... So the question that the skeptic guy asks of Graham Hancock is how do we discount all the other 100,000 theories that are sometimes wildly inaccurate to potentially not inaccurate to maybe they have a grain of truth? We don't know. Mm-hmm. So that's what the scientific process does, is it moves that information forward. And there is an academic bias to lock that kind of information out. There's an academic bias to stick to the status quo because that's how you advance through the university system. So there's all kinds of problems in that method. And yet, to equate like what that guy did with what this clown is doing on Twitter are completely different things, because that guy has not done years and years and years of research on audio analysis. That guy has not done anything. He knows nothing about this. He's collected zero evidence other than some recordings from YouTube and then maybe run it through an audio program.
And maybe I feel like, okay, I'm capable of hearing new information and just considering it as an idea versus needing to know, like, oh yeah, this means this. I feel like I'm not against people who have theories on things with evidence. Even if they're coming from a place, I'm willing to hear ideas and just say, well, there's a little piece here that may mean nothing or may mean something, but it's something.
Well, if you just read the comment section in his thing, yeah, this is obviously the CIA. Thank you for this. This proves that there is two shooters. You see where I'm going with
Well, what if a valid theory happened to be compatible with lunatics? Doesn't mean it was wrong, but it okay. Here's so people do it like 9/11, JFK assassination. Here's some weird evidence that means something. It doesn't mean, oh, that must mean all this other crazy stuff's right. It's more like, well, no, but what it does mean is that something hinky happened and we don't know. Mm-hmm. Building 7 just collapsed on itself. How in the hell did that happen again?
Well,
who knows?
I hear that a lot. Have you read the final engineering report?
I read it over the course of a month every night. No, I've not. I've not read it.
Every single person I've ever heard talk about Building 7 has never read the final engineering report. Not one of them. My point with that is I did read that because I saw the same thing everyone else did. I go, what the fuck? That looks like a controlled demolition. It looks like this happened. Blah, 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 blah. So now there are people that have read the final engineering report, and they say, here's all the reasons why the final engineering report is wrong. And it goes into grand conspiracies and yada, yada, yada. And on and on and on and on. The broad point being is, if you have a team of engineers, and then the theory is, well, we've compromised this entire team of engineers to get them to push our narrative. Good luck with that. Like, just go tell 10 people a secret and see how long your secret lasts.
I can see all the engineers saying, well, we know that this wasn't a grand conspiracy, so how is it possible that a building collapsed on itself with a fire inside of it? Steel structure frame and itself demolished.
Well, that's not what the engineering report says, though.
I could see bias in an engineering process of like, well, clearly it didn't get demolished. It collapsed somehow, so how did that happen?
Well, it says pretty clearly right in the report. They say, well, what you don't see on the camera is there was massive structural damage to that building from falling debris.
What I did see on camera was the BBC with Building 7 behind them saying, this just in, we heard reports that Building 7 has now collapsed, and Building 7 is sitting there, and it's like, huh? And then like 5 minutes later, Building 7 collapses. That's a weird drop of announcement.
Potentially, but again, you get into the thousands of variables that can come in and explain that differently than there was a controlled demolition. What is difficult to reconcile when you read the engineering report on Building 7, they say there was massive structural damage along the front of the building. It was probably going to collapse no matter what was happening.
Well, if you read the Warren report too, the Warren report clearly says Oswald was the only shooter, and that this bullet in his shitty gun went this way and that way and hit him from the front.
Well, there's also a competing theory written by a guy that says, hey, I was a Secret Service agent in the car behind him, and I accidentally discharged my weapon. And there's a competing theory that says, hey, what about the grassy knoll? And there's a competing theory. There's all kinds of competing theories. The Warren report is not a scientific report. That is a political report with political ramifications. Did you ever see the movie Waco, The Rules of Engagement?
Yes.
Do you remember it?
Largely.
Well, at the end of the movie, they have FLIR footage. Some of the most compelling, if you want to talk about evidence, there's some pretty compelling evidence coming from FBI cameras.
Yeah.
And people that analyze those heat signatures, and they go, yeah, these are clear signatures of incoming weapons fire as people are trying to escape the building.
Yeah.
So it looks like pretty solid evidence. If you want to talk about evidence, you've got FLIR footage and people that are experts at analyzing FLIR footage saying that is clearly inbound gunfire from known FBI.
People are trying to escape, and they're like,
and they're sniping them as they come out.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you read the official report on that, I read that entire report, tip to tail, all the way through. And in one paragraph on like page 98 or whatever, they said, regarding the FLIR footage, we've determined those are reflections of light. That's impossible. That is impossible on FLIR footage. FLIR does not register light. It registers heat, and heat only. So that report that was issued by the government agencies is not a scientific report. They did not cover the most compelling, most damning evidence. They went sweep, 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 brush, 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 tap, tap, tap. So I can start to speculate on all the reasons why they might have chosen to do that. I can also imagine the conversations that probably occurred. Are you seriously telling me right now that there's footage of our people sniping American citizens running out of the back of the building that we set on fire intentionally? Uh-huh. After you gassed children? Uh-huh. Oh, that's not getting out. That's going to be bad. Right?
Yeah. Well, and, you want to read the scientific reports on COVID, everything about COVID, how we survived that, who knows? But, man, all the masks really helped. We live in such a trustless society that it can be a political report or a science and engineering report. And I'm just like, you all are so compromised in every regard. I don't even care because it's garbage. Trust the science. I'm like, what does that mean? I think that it's always political, or it's always a show put on to maintain legacy structures.
Potentially.
I don't think Oswald was the only shooter. I think there's things about 9/11. I think there's unknowable things about things going on now. And I'm open to just understanding that without saying, well, I'm waiting for the scientists to tell me what to think.
Well, I mean, but that's what I'm getting at is right now, depending on your perspective, you can say, well, I don't think this, I don't think that. So you've got a belief system in place based on information you don't have.
Based on a history of a criminal government keeping their thumb on us. It's about power and control. It's just like, oh, no, this time they're not doing that. This time they actually want to figure out what happened.
Well, I mean, I hope you hear that I fundamentally agree with you, right? Like, I don't trust...
I'm just playing here, but
I don't trust this information, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And yet, I also try not to give attribution to causal effects of that information, right?
And I don't mind sharing information that I hear that's intriguing and not saying, hey, this happened. I think this now. I just like to entertain ideas without being blind to like, well, no, I gotta wait to hear what Fauci said about that because I just, I can't think about it.
I think nobody thoughtful or conscientious would suggest that you should just defer to blind authority, right? And that's certainly not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, if you're making the trade-off between one blind authority to another, and you're just putting more stock in one because it ideologically aligns with your worldview, then you start tripping yourself up. Not you personally, but just people writ large.
Yeah.
Because when you say, this guy's got compelling evidence of a thing, I go, well, you're just substituting, because you don't understand audio analysis, you don't understand any of this stuff by your own admission. You go, I don't know any of this.
Yeah, I don't.
So by definition, you are deferring to a new authority. This guy is presenting himself as an authority. I did this work. I made this analysis. Here's all my conclusions from that analysis. This is what I think. And you go, I now have doubts about the science coming from the FBI because they're criminals. Okay, well, so you've taken your heuristic bias and you've taken your fundamental bias, your ideological biases and everything else. You've inserted it into a new authority, and now you've granted someone else authority to help guide your thinking and thoughts and opinions about world events as they've occurred. Yeah. And you can start entertaining all kinds of stupid shit. Not you personally.
Yeah, and that's not how I approach things. It's like it's not black and white. Well, something was said here, and that must be right then, or they said this now. Well, then that is an authority.
It's not the suggestion that you're making a black and white decision, or that anybody else would listen to that, because there's a lot of people that put a lot of stock into that, and they do get black and white about it, and they go, "This is clearly means this," right? What the fundamental problem is then it puts you into a type of chaos that means nothing is knowable. So you end up in a nihilistic frame of mind continually, right? Where everything is always suspect. And if you are always operating in a nihilistic frame of mind, then nothing is knowable, and you're right down the Marxist path, and then you are vulnerable to that type of thought manipulation as well. And it's a way to subvert all kinds of things in society by eliminating objective reality.
So by being overly open-minded, I could be susceptible to that.
Well, if you're overly open-minded, I wouldn't say overly open-minded. I would say closed-minded with an open-minded bent. I'm open to all possibilities, especially ones that feed my preconceived notions about the world.
That's probably how I can operate.
Everybody does.
We all do.
Yeah.
In my mind, I can suspend my belief. Like, hey, have you heard of my religion? Hey, have you heard of my religion? It's like, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I just think, are you all right? No.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, I have this evidence. Hey, I have this evidence. We never know. And maybe that's the state of the simulation, is that the most entertaining outcome is the direction, and the fact is we cannot ultimately know everything about everything. We don't. It's our human condition. Given that, I like new ideas. I like entertaining things, but I try not to need to believe stuff, because there's just so much I don't know. But then with that, I don't shut things out because it doesn't fit enough yet. I just sort of I like to entertain offerings that people provide that I can also suspect.
Well, if you can entertain an offering, like you said, and I think a lot of people say, they go, I don't think 9/11 happened the way they think. I go, here's a bunch of evidence that it is. Nope. Well, are you open-minded? No. I mean, fundamentally, if you say that's not true, well, you're not open-minded about that possibility. You've closed your mind to that possibility because you see countervailing information. Do you think JFK was shot by a lone gunman? No. Okay, well, you've closed your mind to countervailing information, right? So I can see why people don't think it's a lone gunman. I think there is compelling evidence. I think there is actually known information about that, because President Trump told Judge Napolitano, I know what happened, with a pretty high degree of certainty, and it's so frightening I don't want to release it to the public.
Yeah, and Trump himself decides after seeing it, you don't want to see it.
Does that matter?
No. Okay. Well, maybe for our light. We'll see. I should plug it in.
Well, I mean, so if and this isn't about you at all. I'm just saying in general, and most especially when it comes to conspiracy theories and things like that. Like the entire QAnon movement went down that rabbit hole because they were unable to falsify information. They weren't unable to.
Lots of ideas and things out there. It's like, oh, prove it wrong.
Right.
How? You know, you can't. So let me plug this in. I can edit this out then.
No, just leave it in. What the hell? It's a fun part of the conversation to plug in laptops.
Somewhere I've got a battery charger. There we go. I guess normally I plug this in, and I didn't this time, and I didn't realize it doesn't give the laptop enough light power. There we go.
Well, I mean, when I take this perspective, though, what I find is that it puts me in conflict with everybody on planet Earth, it seems like. Right after 9/11 happened, I started talking about academic topics around why that might have happened. But at the time, I was also heavily politically motivated, involved, thinking about things, thinking about politics, and I was deep into libertarianism and things like that. And I said, look, man, Ron Paul was talking about it at the time, too, back in 98. He said, he was talking about blowback, CIA blowback. We get blowback. We entertain these things come back to haunt us. Osama bin Laden, 2 or 3 years prior to the 9/11 attack, said, my goal is to bankrupt the United States of America. He didn't say I want to go blow up the building. He didn't say I hate freedom. He didn't say I hate, economies.
He probably had nothing to do with 9/11.
Well,
other than the talk. Sort of like the Biden regime could say, we have nothing to do with the assassination too, and yet we keep talking about, man, Trump needs to be killed.
Right.
So they didn't do it, and yet you push this narrative that then when something happens, you'd say, okay, say nothing was planned, nothing was intended, and yet something happened. Are their hands completely clean if they were the whole time calling him Orange Hitler?
Well, here's the thing about that though, is if you found out definitively, Joe Biden himself sat down, picked up the phone. There's videotape, unmistakable videotape. There's 14,000 people in the room, all with their cell phone cameras out, and they all recorded the same exact thing. Joe Biden picks up the phone and says, I am greenlighting the hit on Trump. Go, go, go. Alpha team, Bravo team, Charlie team, all go now.
He'd struggle saying that, but yes.
Kill President Trump today. Click. And everybody recorded it, right? Then you would have this unmistakable truth. We know for a fact Joe Biden ordered that hit. What happens the next day?
A cover-up.
No, but see what I'm saying? Like, what happens when people, what they're looking for is the reason to be outraged. That
Sure.
is the whole purpose of this
Yeah.
exercise. I want to get fucking mad about someone doing something. Okay, well, Trump didn't get shot in the head. He got shot in the ear. So, good job. Nice. That's the outcome. That's the best possible outcome out of this, other than him not getting shot in the ear at all.
Right.
He didn't get killed. Yay. There's a really funny video about a guy that said, hey man, they played Nocturna, whatever, the little opera at the end of the RNC. It just so happens, I worked on this movie, The Sum of All Fears, because I remember it distinctly because we used to call it The Sum of All Fears. And it's a story about a president who survives an assassination attempt and then goes and he just fucking turns people off at the end of the movie. Like all the people who were conspiring to kill him, the deep state actors. He goes around and has them executed, basically. He has them assassinated. But that song is playing throughout that whole thing. So this guy goes, is it just me? Like, every other convention I've ever seen in my life, they play some fucking Ted Nugent song, Yay America, you know, we rockin' America, like some big, get the crowd going, this and that. And they played a rock song as he's walking off, and then this opera comes on with a live opera singer singing that song that just happens to be, right? And I thought, yeah, that's great. You just won the internet, dude. That's fucking awesome. Because, you know, now again, I don't have the information. Maybe Trump just thought, you know what, it'd be really nice to class up to the RNC. Or maybe he saw that movie and said, you motherfuckers, I'm coming for you. Oh, you better watch out. Here's a little message to the whole fucking world. You're on my radar now. I am the Don. I stand up here on stage, unscathed, unbroken, unbent. You're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
I go, that's kind of a neat thing to think about. That would be fun. You know, whether there's any merit to it, I don't know. I don't know what Trump was thinking when he picked the song. I don't know what they're... I don't know anything.
It's that 4D chess stuff, you know.
You never know.
Who
But
knows?
I mean, it's pretty fun to think about. I guess my point about all that 9/11 shit was there were very clear signs that someone was pissed at the United States, and there were very good reasons for it because we went in and basically stole oil from countries, and we invaded countries, and we've done all kinds of shitty things in the Middle East. We did all kinds of shitty things in South and Central America. We've done shitty things all around the world that people were upset about. You go, hey man, you fucked us all over so you could protect your banana plantations. That's not very nice. One of our generals, Teddy Roosevelt, said, hey, I went to war to protect the banana people. I went to war to protect the fucking rubber people. I went to war to protect this fucking, you know, he said, my job was a thug. I was just America's thug going around protecting our corporate interests. That's one of our presidents said that out loud.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Right.
Like
Dwight Eisenhower.
Yeah, we're doing that stuff.
Dwight Eisenhower said to the nation, hey, just FYI, there's a shadowy cabal of people that are just driving us into warfare all the time.
Exactly.
You should really watch out for this shit. What did everybody do?
Well, and what a perfect environment for a cartel of powers, and call them whatever acronyms you want to have that we have, you know, that we imagine. They can do all this covert stuff. That is their business. It's all quiet, secret, covert, whatever. You don't even want to know. You can't know. We don't even tell the president. And so then your standard for burden of proof is like, prove it. Prove what evidence do you have? yes, they're doing it all over, and then their answer is, well, prove it. No. See, this report clearly says this. We're not doing this. And everybody's like, well, shoot, yeah, I don't know. We don't have the evidence.
Well, my point is even if you could prove it true, people are just going to sit there and go, oh, well, I knew it was true. No, I'm mad about it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing.
Vote harder.
I'm going to vote harder.
Bitcoin, well, that's where Bitcoin fixes all this.
Right. I swear to God, yes. It sounds trite to say that, and I say, look, man.
It does.
It fixes this not because it magically erases corruption, not because it magically erases. It just...
all these incentives change.
It changes a fundamental rule at the bottom of the game. That's all it does. It just fixes one little squirrely rule.
Bitcoin fixes this.
What comes of that rule fix, I think, is impossible to predict.
Right.
I think it will be net positive.
Yes. Net positive, largely unknowable, but the shit going on right now is not going to be what it would be under a Bitcoin standard.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking of, so evidence. A paper written, I can't remember if it was a collection of intelligence agencies with the Rand Corporation or something, and they wrote a paper, a project for a new American century in 1999.
Yeah.
And in there, it's like all these global problems, situations, incentives, things they'd like to be doing, or the problems here, this could happen, we'd like to do this, and we can't because, punchline, America has a fairly, not isolationist, but right now the climate is sort of nationalist, quasi-isolationist, not less interventionary, other than all the covert shit the CIA does all the time.
Right.
But what we need is a new Pearl Harbor to galvanize support for all the wars we want to do, to pop this and pop that, and quietly, it's not about the dictator, it's about their
oil field.
the petrodollar, getting them onto our bank and our fiat, then trading gold free and clear. Right. We need a new Pearl Harbor. Thankfully, conspiracy or not, thank God we got attacked. Now, finally, we can pop Saddam. Completely unrelated. Right. We can get into Afghanistan and get that opiates.
Right. And the minerals. Let's not forget about
Osama, completely unconnected other than he hates America. Libya, Gaddafi, nothing to do with anything, but we popped him. Where else? Why not wherever we want because we can? Because what? Terrorism?
Yeah.
We needed a new Pearl Harbor. Thankfully, we got one.
Yeah.
So we marched forward with that, and it just took the will of the people to not vote harder or be against it, I guess. But
well, people went out and protested all this shit.
Yeah, there were protests,
but that's my point. Is people are not like there was a unifying purpose in casting off British rule. There's no unifying purpose right now for anybody. There's a bunch of scattered, decentralized, sort of fucked up little things all over the place. But there's just a bunch of holes in the ship, and everyone's just trying to figure out which hole they should patch first. Meanwhile, the ship's still sinking. It doesn't fix any of that shit. Like, it doesn't...
And we're divided into two camps. It's like we're very divided. It's like we're all kind of seeing the same thing, but depending on what your bias is, you're watching an entirely different movie.
Right.
We're seeing different movies, and we think we're watching the same headliner.
Yeah.
And we're seeing different frames.
Well, 100%. And the funny thing about it is things like, if you look at Mitch McConnell, who was the driving force behind the Supreme Court picks, 100%. Like, I wasn't Trump. Trump doesn't give a shit about religion. Zero chance. He does it because he knows that's what people like to hear. His base. He is super loyal to his base. He'll do whatever his base likes. He doesn't give a fuck, I think. I don't know. I've never met the guy. Maybe he does. But Mitch McConnell knows that a substantial portion of his base has one thing and one thing in mind. The only thing they give a fuck about is banning abortion. It's all they care. They are single issue and adamant about it. Right? They will withhold dollars or they will funnel all kinds of money towards the guy that gets that done. So what's his incentive? Appease them. So he pushes through these Supreme Court justices that they go, they will vote our way, we think. Pretty sure they're going to go our way. We've read all their, decisions in the past. We know them as people. We're 99% sure if we get these people on the bench, they're going to go our way on abortion. So they go, yay, big win, whoopee, we did it, we changed the Supreme Court, their voter base is super happy. What I can see already happening with this Supreme Court is they are going to start making decisions that Republicans are going to fucking hate. They're going to go, what? Hey, how come our Supreme Court? They're supposed to be our guys. They're supposed to, and they're deciding things because they are deciding things according to the legal standards that they've adopted, which included things like overturning Roe v. Wade, but are also going to include a whole litany of things that the Republicans are not going to like. They're going to get super mad about some of these decisions coming down the pike in the next 5-10 years. Things that are going to cockblock them, things that are going to fuck them over, because they chose to focus on the one single issue so they could get their short-term financing and they could get their short-term support. They've potentially conceded all kinds of problematic things that they haven't anticipated a long time down the road. But that's the fiat mindset.
Time preference. Get this now at the expense of like sort of long-term maybe legs.
You don't know where the judges are going to go. And if you have a court like that, they will hamstring all kinds of stupid shit that you have decided is a good idea and some other part of your base really wants. And all of a sudden you're getting cockblocked left, right, and center. And then they start wishing they had those goddamn liberal justices back because they would have ruled on this. And you see, like,
yeah.
So it's really hard to see the blowback. It's really hard to see the knock-on effects of decisions that you're making right now based on short-term incentives and short-term gains. So we'll see what happens with that. But overall, my broad takeaway for the whole thing is, skepticism is great, and it requires a lot of humility and thoughtfulness, and just, the trick is you almost have to be robotic about it and keep the emotion out, because I'm super vulnerable to conspiratorial thinking, 100%. I love that kind of shit. I'm just like, this is great. I want to, and I have to continually check myself and go, whoa, just slow down, dude. Like, let's just think about this. Like, what are the 1,000 other ways that this can get explained?
Sure.
And then just wonder about it. But if you get entrenched, like a lot of those people from the sound video, or people around 9/11, or QAnon people, or the Waco people, or anybody, Ruby Ridge people, like those things are much clearer pieces of evidence that the federal government murdered its own people. I mean, It's pretty straightforward. I walked out of that documentary and was just incensed, infuriated, angry. Rah. I read the congressional report and I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Do you know what the collective human populace did in the United States of America? Meh. I don't give a fuck."
Yeah, and I think there's people that care, but it's sort of like, what are you going to do about it? That's the thing. Point. There's a lot of people that really do care, but it's like, well, what are you going to do?
Nothing.
There's nothing to do.
That's why these people get to run amok.
Yeah.
But that's been true throughout history. There's very, very, very fleetingly few instances where people all get together and go for a unified purpose. And then when they unleash it, it turns out to be a clusterfuck anyway. Like, if you think the early United States was some sort of smooth sailing ship, it was fucked. It was fucked all the way up to the point where it broke out into civil war. Like, that's how fucked it was. And it's still been fucked ever since. Like, it's never been like the shining beacon on a hill. It's like a good idea in theory, on paper, and it's never really quite worked that way. And it's always been a complex fucking mess.
Well, with Bitcoin, maybe I think the goal can remain the same. That we're still striving for what we envision.
Right.
Bitcoin can get us there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the fundamental hope.
When I heard that, so Trump is scheduled to talk at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville next week.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that, I was kind of like, well, I mean, interesting. A voter block, I guess, now. Some support, but, Trump's Trump. And I don't know what to make of that other than like a kind of a headliner. And we'll just see. He doesn't strike me as like, pro Bitcoin, and he really gets it. It's kind of like covering a little slice of some potential base. Right. After the assassination attempt, I feel the same, and yet, there's just so much of a lens on it now.
Yeah.
Of he's still willing to show up and do that.
Yeah.
And anything he says, or just if people say he's at a Bitcoin conference, it's attention, potentially some orange pilling, or just some awareness of, he's willing to talk at a Bitcoin conference a couple weeks after this.
Yeah.
It means something. And also, I'm curious as to what he'll actually say. Now, is he a
I
bullshitter?
am not going to take your Bitcoin from you.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot.
He will say whatever he has to or wants to, and I think he's the best showman we've ever had.
Oh, God,
So
yeah.
he can just say anything. And then when he's in office, I mean, who knows? He's entertaining Jamie Dimon. I mean, give me a break.
Epstein's banker.
Epstein's banker. So ultimately, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, we'll see. Now, J.D. Vance seems to be, well, he's a shitcoiner, but...
Did J.D. Vance take money from AIPAC?
I don't know.
Does Trump take money from AIPAC?
I can't say I know.
How many people in Trump's cabinet took money from AIPAC?
Probably most of them.
How many congressmen take money from AIPAC? Like, you know, I mean,
yeah,
there's like a fundamental problem that nobody
there,
seems to give a flying fuck about.
Yeah.
But, you know, whatever. We got a foreign agent that is bribing our officials.
But it's a shift from Bitcoin's bad to
Bitcoin good.
Bitcoin could be good.
Yeah.
So, hey, I'll take it. It is a shift. If they're not anti-Bitcoin, it's just Bitcoin's going to win anyway.
Right.
It's just less overt fight that, hey, if America can get on board, it's just a wider crack for Bitcoin to prove it. At least it's not overt resistance and that America just stubbornly loses because, by God, we're got a whatever.
Well, that's, you know, for the next 4 years, and then the next administration will come in and fuck it all up, and then the next administration will come and fuck that up. And, I mean, it's like an ongoing process of like, hey, you know.
And maybe all the politics matter less, as we've talked about in the past. Maybe the drama around the politics about Bitcoin don't matter when Bitcoin simply has crept into everything.
Well, that's kind of where I end up at the end of all of my sort of ranting and raving and thinking about things and talking about things is most of that outrage. Like if you walk down the street right now and say, how many outraged people have you met today? Like when you go to work, how many people are like, I'm going to fucking kill you. No, I'm going to fucking kill you. You just walk to work and people are just doing what they do and they bicker about who made the coffee and who left the fucking broccoli in the fridge and shit like that. But for the most part, everything's just kind of working. And yeah, there's places where people are rioting, like in Leeds or whatever, and you know, immigrants are causing this problem. So there are these macro issues going on. But broad scope, if you just kind of like travel across America and go, what are the big problems right now that you see as you're traveling across America? Like probably nothing. Mm-hmm. You're just going to drive. You could drive coast to coast and just go, how was your trip? That was great. You just had a road trip.
It. It was... Yeah.
Was it great chaos in the streets?
No, great.
Was it civil war brewing everywhere you went?
The Alamo was protected like, oh, get out.
Oh, yeah.
And there's definitely meaning and intent behind that, and that stood out. So not that there's, I mean, so some people live lives of quiet desperation. Others are, you know, largely we're polite, and down inside of us there's simmering opinions. Outrage that people just have been trained to keep a lid on.
Right.
By and large, traveling the country, everywhere I went, great, nice, well, cranky hotel manager, but great people. I'm like, America's great. I love America. I love Americans. People are inherently good.
Yeah.
I feel happy and proud to live in this country for good reasons because we can get along and with everything going on, like the divisive, divide and conquer, angst and anger and
it's all bullshit online, dude. That's all that is.
It's not real when you get down to just humans getting along day to day.
Yeah. So right now in the echo chambers and the left-right echo chambers, like, yeah, people are fucking pissed and outraged and yada, yada, yada. They still go to work together. They still hang out together. They still talk to each other. You know, I mean, yeah, during the Trump years, there was like families getting separated because someone liked Trump and someone didn't, and yada, yada. But, you know, so yeah, there is a sort of polarized sense of things. I would argue it's always been that way. It's just, it kind of simmers to the top and then it kind of boils down, then it simmers to the top again, boils down again. You know, but people are saying, right, we need a civil war, we need a revolution, we need this, we need to kick the Marxists out, we need blah, 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 blah. You know, and everyone talks about a violent revolution. I go, well, I can't even get 12 people to just follow some fucking simple rules and policies. You want to marshal half the country to go fight the other half of the country. And I remember having a conversation with a guy at work, and we had this like guy who was a total left-wing wackadoodle dude, and you know, there's a bunch of right-wing wackadoodle dudes, and they're sort of commingled. These guys got along great. He was a military veteran. He served in Vietnam. He was a cool guy. I mean, very thoughtful guy. Wrote some sort of shitty fiction books. I don't know. But he ended up like pulling a knife on a fucking MAGA supporter. I don't know. Yeah. Well, it was funny because the way they spun it was like, because the media spun against him too, and our entire prison staff spun against him. And, one of our union guys was going, hey, you better get prepared to hire this guy back, even though you've been maligning him for the last 2 years because of this investigation. Because he went around and got all this footage from all these local cameras. He had to go do the work himself, but he did. And he showed that these people had been harassing him the whole time and following him around. And then they just clipped this one part where the MAGA guys were, and he was standing there with a knife, right? But I remember the guy that was defending him goes, well, he was making this statement like, well, these fucking liberals and we should just go shoot them and this and that and the other thing. He goes, well, that guy you've been defending for the last 6 months and doing a glorious job of it. I really admired him because he didn't give a fuck about the politics. He knew that guy. He was a good officer. He was a good guy. And he had opinions that everyone disagreed. He'd walk in a room and people, oh, fuck, I don't want to hear about your Biden bullshit and whatever, and just walk out, But it was that superficial surface politics fucking
It's
bullshit.
kind of like, you like the Saints and I like the Rams.
Right.
Oh, damn you.
That's all it was.
Because that's how politics is for me. It's kind of like...
Well, but that's what I asked the guy. I said, hey, man, right now you're talking about Civil War. You want to go fight. Are you going to go shoot that guy in the face? Well, of course not. Well, there you go. That's what you're talking about right now. It's you want to invoke all these ideas because you're so outraged about all the dumb shit they're saying. But what you're talking about is picking up a gun and shooting him in the fucking face. He's your friend. You've known him for 20 years. Now you want to get on different sides of him and fucking shoot guns at him? That's where you want to go with the Civil War fucking talk? Like, how about you back off that shit? Because it's fucking nonsense. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about brother on brother, sister on sister, husband on wife, wife on husband violence. Mm-hmm. Just tone that shit down. Because if you get to that place, it's catastrophic.
The keyboard warrior stuff, I mean, I know a good handful of people that get along very well in normal life, mm-hmm. as we do. And they get home or at night on their keyboard and they're like, da, 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 and it's volatile or, angry or trolling.
It's bullshit, yeah.
And it's like, and so it's sort of like this separate reality where maybe it's cathartic or maybe down deep in there they can unload on what they really believe, but they know how to behave in meat space. And there's something about the keyboard stuff or online, it's like it feels very cathartic and real, but we also know it's not.
Right.
But then you juxtapose the two of it, and local police department canceled a decent officer for that kind of a thing. Meat space, good and great, whatever. Topic comes up, speaks his mind, uses a certain label term, whatever. Canceled because people see that, and it's real enough to say, well, hey,
cancel time. Yeah.
You're on the stand testifying to something completely unrelated on a case, and the defense attorney says, "Is it true that on Facebook you used this term to refer to these people?" What are you going to say? Well, tell us about that. Canceled.
Done. Yeah.
So, as an officer, stakes are high. As a professional, or who if you're like we are involved in criminal justice. You watch yourself, or like we talked about, you know how to do your job, you know what works and how to be professional.
Correct.
And even as things come up and you think things in your head all the time about stuff, everyone does, mm-hmm. and we all manage because we know how to, interact real time. And so there's this line of people get on the keyboard and go crazy with stuff that maybe they're feeling at the time or that's down in there, but it's also not real. Well, but it's real enough when...
Well, those keyboard warriors, the thing that they don't understand, and this gets back to the biology of things, is those algorithms are designed, like they are consciously designed to invoke those feelings.
Yeah, it reinforces that, hey...
Because that's where they get their engagement from, and that's where they make their money.
Mm-hmm.
So, if what I really think people need to do if they want to improve their mental health is to recognize that they're being manipulated just as much as an addict is being manipulated by alcohol, right? You, me, everybody that's scrolling through that shit needs to detox from it from time to time, or at the very least recognize they're addicted to their outrage. And then they can start going, oh, yeah, this isn't real. Mm-hmm. This is manufactured emotions in me that are amplifying because that's what the algorithm is teaching me to do. Mm-hmm. And if you can get to that point, then these arguments and these bickering and this fighting and this anger and this rage and all this stuff starts tamping down, because you can start, all of us can start going, well, I can be a little more thoughtful about this because I know for a fact that this is fake. Mm-hmm. It's not just fake news from the left, it's fake news from both sides. It's not just fake news, which is why I rail against things like this shut fucking timer guy, because we go, dude, you're just being a fucking dick and you're part of the problem now. Mm-hmm. You're amplifying a problem for no reason with fucking stupidly incomplete, hugely biased, objective in mind information. I want to make people think there were two shooters so I can call everything into question. Oh, fuck, thanks a lot, dude, because now there's going to be a bunch of people that are too dumb to realize that are going to believe what you're thinking. And they're going to say, I've seen evidence that says there's two shooters. I know there's two shooters. You can tell me anything you want. I don't give a fuck. There's no way this could have happened. Well, then you're fucking done, dude. Like, so
well, when the Secret
cut
Service,
off all communication.
When the Secret Service releases their report that they make it all make sense,
it's going to be full of shit.
Then, well, no, then I feel all good now because it's what I need to believe because it's normal.
But nobody believes that. Nobody in their right mind thinks that, right? The Secret Service is that all they're trying to do is to patch over things so the storm goes away. Like, they don't give a fuck whether anybody believes any of this shit. They don't care about your outrage. They don't care about what you're fucking typing on fucking Twitter. They don't give a flying fuck about that.
The powers are all about self-preservation.
Well, the powers are all about just get the attention off of me so I can just do whatever the fuck it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, but that's true of everybody. If you suddenly got the focus of cancel culture, the only thing you're going to give a fuck about is making it go away.
Yeah.
You don't give a shit about the ideology behind it. You're not going to care about the philosophy. You're not going to care about the facts. People that sit there and argue the facts are people like Peter Schiff, who goes, here's all the facts of why this fucking bank thing was a fucking fraud, blah, blah, blah. Nobody gives a fuck. Literally no one gives a fuck. The best thing he could have possibly done was go, yep, my bank was bad. They closed it. Move on. And just bury that as fast as fucking possible and get on with your life. He became the focus of the state for very nefarious reasons. There's all sorts of factual allegations going back and forth. He won lawsuits, and he's fighting. And I go, you're just feeding the machine, dude. All you're doing right now is feeding the machine. But it's the same thing that happens when people get divorced. You want good advice? I'm thinking about get divorced. Just get ready to give up half your shit and fucking settle. Doesn't matter what they say. And move the fuck on. Like, do not get involved in your ego and trying to prove that you're right or wrong with this, because you're just going to get fucked 100% of the time. And 0% of people will take that advice. 100% of the time they will go, but she wants my fucking dog, man. You're not getting my fucking dog. I'll fucking fight this to the death. And then you're sitting there arguing for the next fucking 15 years. Mm-hmm. And you will burn 10 times the amount of capital that you would have preserved just by fucking swallowing
it's
your
like a
goddamn
mental
pride.
Prison, and yeah, no
right.
kidding.
And it's going to diminish your health and all sorts of shit. But that's the same thing that needs to happen with social media. You just need to suck it up, fucking start adulting, recognize you're getting manipulated, and just go, yeah, well, it's probably all bullshit.
Years ago, I was pretty active on Facebook, and it was kind of like my connection with family and friends, and a kind of cathartic outlet, I guess, although I was really careful. And as what sucks you in became more and more like, oh man, here's another video of some guy somewhere stabbing somebody, and
Right.
And I pretty well stopped using Facebook. I'll have friends that tag me and stuff. I had to manage that too because I get tagged and shit. And I was like, But anyway, I just hardly use Facebook anymore because it sucks me into this like base drama of garbage. I just trust that if something really interesting happens, and Facebook becomes a place where people post all kinds of like, this just happened. I'm going to hear about it.
Right.
But if I try to seek it out or find it, I'll see something, and part of me is like I have an opinion.
Right.
I shut it down. I'm just like, nope, not punching that tar.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get it on my hands. I'm just like, no, move on. Twitter can be like that too.
No, it's 100%
I just seriously, I treat social media as something inherently toxic, but also useful. I learn a lot. I enjoy it, and I just have to dose myself carefully. And also, I've got a real flag, a radar for, okay, like that video or something, an interesting idea here. I'll just sort of like consider it and move on. But I do not like hang my head on any hook anymore. I'm just like, okay, well, I got my thing. I learned stuff from smart people, and stuff that crosses a certain line, scroll.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the only, like, the beauty of the Russian propaganda system was everybody knew it was bullshit. The problem with our propaganda system is it's self-induced. So half the people think what they're reading is real.
Yeah.
But it's all bullshit. Like, it's 100% BS. Like I said, the majority of our Congress is compromised by a foreign actor. I don't see any fucking outrage about it. I don't see anybody screaming. I mean, there's one kid that talks about it, and everyone goes, yeah, that's bad. And that's it. But people get really pissed off about immigrant stabs woman on train, right? They're just going to lose their fucking shit.
It's a box here, yeah.
But that's the thing that really outrages them. Like, these little, small social violations, right? Social norm violations are the things that get really bent out of shape about. But gross systemic problems that they don't care because it's too much, they can't process it, so they take it in the dick, just get kicked in the dick over and over and over again. They don't care because they're so busy being pissed off about social norm violations. It's like, dude.
And I think at some level, some of that is sort of a weapon of distraction, where we're caught up and busy with this, these things, little fires here and there at the bottom level. So meanwhile, broad systemic things can be happening, but we're very focused on these things. Well, and then we lose track of, like, well, meanwhile, the ship sails along sinking.
Well, but that's why it occurs, because historically speaking, that's everybody. It doesn't matter. You go back to the Revolutionary War, what percentage of the population participated in it? Like this
30%, yeah.
Right. So the rest of the people were just sitting around worried about crops and Indians and fucking disease and their teeth falling out and getting drunk, and just they have no fucking clue, no concept, and no capability of rendering any of this stuff. So people that are thinking about it, dealing with it, doing it, are making decisions that they go, we think this is a good course of action, and they have shitty information too. They just happen to be at a different level than these folks are. But it's slight. It's matters of degree. It's not any sort of great chasm. And these people are confronted with other forces of entropy and chaos, and they're making shitty decisions about shitty situations with shitty information and doing the best they possibly can. And so that's how you end up with the world looking like it is. So when you start assigning, superhuman powers and abilities to secret cabals of people doing things, I think you're giving way too much credit. You're giving way too much authority to people that are just not much different than you are. And most of them are just little beady-eyed bean counters that are just, they're trying to figure shit out in a thoughtful way with no good options for any of it. So shit happens. Like, shit almost happened last week, 2 weeks ago. When was that? You got shot.
It was a week ago, literally 7 days ago.
And so, on the tail end of the probability spectrum, Trump dodged a bullet legitimately, like 100%. And now people are going to seek meaning and try and find something in the chaos. The thing I most admire about Trump is not that he jumped up and pumped his fist like fucking P.T. Barnum would do shit like that. Like, that's not the thing I look at. The thing I look at is that he appears to me, by all accounts, to be a man that can accept the forces of entropy and roll with it. He just goes, I get it. Hey, I dodged a bullet. Last time I saw that chart, it saved my fucking life. It's crazy. He had all the charts all over the fucking screen.
That's what's amazing to me. Oh my God, can you imagine, had he been hit, how different a lot of this discussion would be, or where we're going. And in watching that, you've probably seen those videos where his head's, and he's always kind of looking to the right the whole time.
Right.
So there's that. And then he cranks his head to look at the chart.
Yeah.
In that moment that the bullet gets his ear instead of his spinal cord.
Right.
Oh my goodness. That's where people
lose their shit.
Some people are like, the guy is protected by God.
Of course.
People believe that now.
Right.
Which is and that's where I say, I mean, I don't know. But what I say is, it's like, the dude is president now.
Yeah.
He just got elected.
Probably.
And if he just stays, like, well, at the Republican convention they had, if he just kind of stays cool and stays humble and keeps things talking united, superficial, you can be as superficial as you want to be, and if you just stay cool at this point, act presidential, and just, he is, as Biden can't reconcile what his story
he can't
is
reconcile
now.
Fucking stairs, dude.
He's still talking about the the fine people hoax and other stuff. He just keeps bringing up these old tropes, and it's like, but what about what just happened? Orange Hitler.
Right.
It's like, no, that's not playing anymore, and the Democratic side is politically in shambles.
Oh yeah, they're destroyed.
They're gone.
Well, I mean, I think it's sort of hilarious. There is some merit, I think, to the idea of like, hey, Trump legitimately dodged a bullet, and he is exposed to Bitcoin in a positive light now. So those two factors alone, I think, may have a profound impact on that man's psyche.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's highly likely. So, you never know what kind of president you're going to get out of that. He may go on to be one of the greatest presidents we ever had, or he may go on to be the same fucking pumpkin he was last time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. The guy has matured significantly in the intervening years. I think he's been through hell, clearly. And he tolerates this shit with a high degree of, a high degree of tolerance.
He just has like a kind of strength about it all. I mean,
dude, I would be a fucking puddle on the ground if I went through all that shit. Like, just all those court hearings and all that. I mean, it's just nonstop stress, nonstop, and that guy.
It takes us. I mean, like a psychopath like we talked about, but I mean, he's strong.
Well, he's an impressive psychopath.
Yeah.
And, I give the guy a lot of credit, but like I said, the thing that's most impressive to me is that he is one of the few people on planet Earth that can accept and embrace forces of entropy, forces of chaos, and go, it's just how the cookie crumbles, man. I'm still here, and I'm going to keep going. And that's like that is the cornerstone of that idea that the past is regret, the future is anxiety. All you have is right now, and he seems to be one of the few people on planet Earth that actually embodies that principle. I don't know, I mean, maybe he goes to bed at night screaming and crying and fucking, having Melania cradle him in his diapers or something. It could be, right? I mean, maybe he's just.
And then he brushes himself off and is like,
yeah, all right, I'm back, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I have this sneaking suspicion he's a guy that is has found that fortitude somewhere, or has just dealt with chaos long enough that he's comfortable operating in chaos, and he's comfortable with the fact, like, it just wasn't my time.
It's a pretty rare quality. Yeah. So
anyway,
well, we're at like over 2 hours. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But we solved everything. We figured it out. Bitcoin fixes this, and
100%.
We had a good conversation. So
yeah,
cool. We're gonna wrap it up. Thanks for joining us. Bye.